We're going to be live on YouTube. I'm streaming live on here. We got a lot of things to talk about in California. We had a busy day, very high intensity day. All right, so got it. Literally, I'm trying to keep the whole video. we're so deplatformed, like I have to like keep all these like weird things. It's so funny. So for my TikTok followers, I have Tara on my screen. She is co-founder of Freedom Angels, and we are going to discuss what happened today. I mean, it was a juicy day in San Joaquin County. So we got information that there was a school here in Stockton, California, that was discriminating and segregating children. So far, they were separating them where they had to eat lunch at the table because they did not wear a muzzle, and they had to use a different restroom than other kids because they would not wear one. The odd thing is, Tara, like they weren't wearing one for like 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it changed up. That was crazy. Let's talk about the school piece.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, for the last 2 weeks, a small group of students at a public charter school, like Denise said, in San Joaquin County, have been going in without the muzzle. But what's been happening to them in the last 2 weeks, and these are little kids. These are like, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, 6 or 7 really year-olds. 8-year-olds. And if they were not wearing, if they were under mask choice, they were had to use a separate bathroom, a separate spot at the lunch table, in a separate space outside, in a separate space in the classroom, which again, that is discriminatory. That is segregation. It is, we had Brown versus Board of Education in '54 decided that separate is not equal. So like Denise said, the interesting thing is that with the changing regulations coming down from California at the state level on masks, which are going to be changing into a strongly recommended position versus required by the state come March 12th, this particular school district superintendent of schools for this public charter, told us that he was working with his insurance company, their insurance company, and their legal team, and they decided that they could, make a decision to keep the kids out of school right now. And their intention is to do so even after March 12th. Their solution is a lot like LAUSD, right, Denise? We're going to forcefully, without consent, move you into a distant learning position, which is not the same as in-person learning.
Yeah, it's crazy that, everyone keeps passing the buck, right? Like you go to the state level, and we know Gavin has already said, look, I can't mandate anything, I can guide, right? So we already know it's not at a state level. The local level people are acting as though they have no power at all to make these decisions when they are well within their rights, the laws, and the Constitution to make the right choice for this. And they're just passing the buck. And we saw that today. The superintendent, I wish I remembered his name. Anthony, yeah. He, no conversation. And, the interesting piece is when the mom said, I see you out at events all the time without a mask. Like, didn't you just have a visitor here at the school without a muzzle and you let him in because he said he wasn't going to wear one? Which one is it? Adults are really the ones at risk and the ones who transmit. So we're going to punish these kids. It was infuriating to see them rush the door like they were dirty and they shouldn't even have the audacity to be there. Like, it was infuriating.
Shame on them. It was beyond infuriating to have to see little children face off against adults. Adults are supposed to protect children, and they're supposed to be able to trust us that we're going to do right by them. And the adults in this situation, as the superintendent and the 2 administrators or employees that they had enforcing at the door, they were not doing right by the children. There was a small group of them, maybe 10, 12 of kids, and 20 odd parents in support, their parents, of course. And they literally stood in front of the door, would not let them in, blocked them. At one point, 2 of the little girls were trying to open the door to walk in, and someone jumped in front of them. One of the ladies blocked him, closed the door, and those little girls started crying, which is, and they pulled it together. They what they actually experienced was the appropriate human emotion for the kind of abuse that they had just experienced. Honestly, that level of you're unclean, you're not, the same as those people in here. And let everyone know, this was a group of mixed race children that were standing together as sisters and brothers and friends without any recognition of the color of their skin. Just again, the content of their character, as we all supposed to be judged by. Yet they were very clearly aware that they were being treated differently than all the children inside. And they were being different. These kids don't not see the hypocrisy of adults walking around and eating at restaurants and people doing, living their lives. That hypocrisy is not lost on them.
And that's the thing, like I was seeing some comments on here talking about, don't make the kids do that. Get them out of the front line. Look, the parents had this conversation with their kids. They knew they were done with it. Oh, my phone went weird. They knew they didn't want to wear one anymore. And so when people say, oh, they shouldn't be fighting for, so what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just let these schools get away with it? When, and this isn't even like a radical idea. Neighboring neighboring schools are making decisions saying mass choice. I've seen it in threads all on my channel, my Telegram channel, people saying, look, we worked with the principal, we have mass choice here. So this isn't a radical thing that we're talking about. It's something he can talk to neighboring counties and school districts and say, how did you do this? Instead of completely shutting out the idea. Like,
oh, absolutely. I mean, there's all the cover in the world for them to do the right thing. We were telling him, look, you're not pioneering anything. And he knew that. He knew about local school districts that went to choice even ahead of current, orders and regulations that are being announced. So he knows that from judicial decisions to the state to other school districts, people are pioneering the path way ahead of him. He's got all the cover he needs to stand on choice, and they are choosing not to. And, for the folks, like you said, Denise, about talking about, like, don't put the children there. We agree with you that it should never have to be the children fighting this. But unfortunately, that's the moment in time we're in. And it is shame on the adults for letting that happen. But these children with their parents made that decision. And it was very, it's a peaceful and loving, supported environment. Honestly, the kids can turn this all around right now.
Oh, we've seen that in different school districts across California. Kids are taking it upon themselves because they're just done with it. It's been 2 years. And to sit there and hold on when that's the thing, these school boards, these superintendents, they play the dumb card. They play like, oh, I don't have any information. We're not getting, and no one's getting back to us, blah, blah, blah. No, you talk to your neighboring counties. If you really want to know what's going on, you talk to people, and you are connected in one way or another. You're connected to each other. Mm-hmm. Talk to each other. Like, if you really want to protect our kids, and if this is really based on science, then really talk the science. Let's talk. Instead, it's they pass the buck, and they know that now this is just a political move. That's it.
Oh, yeah. And let's be clear, Denise and I, ahead of most people since 2015 and beyond, have been, even though we've been fighting on human and civil rights around medical freedom, our personal choice and our first strategy to tell people is pull your kids. This system is an indoctrination and institutional system that isn't serving them. But we also understand that until there's, if there is even one child left in a system that is discriminating or segregating, then it's just as much our on us to stand for them and and help support in the battle against that. This was decided a long time ago, 60 years ago. You don't get to segregate. You don't get to discriminate. Separate is not equal. It's quite simple. It's no different now. And these, it's really a shame that the adults haven't stood up sooner and stronger and held a line so that little 7-year-old girls don't have to try and walk through and desegregate a school and fight discrimination and hate and rejection right there in their face. That's awful. But the more empowered they get, these little kids were also fully empowered. They, supported by each other and their families. But the kids need to go on strike with the support of their parents, a peaceful strike sitting outside. How else do you think you get to segregate and course correct when all prevailing logic and agendas and data and science and law and suffering and human and civil rights are just being completely ignored? You have to peacefully not comply.
That's the only way that you can't comply your way out of this. You can't negotiate your way out of this. It is mass, nonviolent, non-compliance. That is the only way that get done. We've seen that through all the civil rights movements. You don't need certain things. All you need is to really have numbers and have the people standing together. And so when people say just homeschool, well, yeah, maybe you're lucky enough to be able to do that, because homeschooling is not everybody can do it. But if you do homeschool, it's still important to engage in it, because they're not going to stop at school age kids. They're going to come after the homeschoolers. They're going to come after everybody. And unless we step in, and like you said, Tara, maybe if the adults would have taken the reign on this, kids wouldn't have had to be involved in it. They've been in the forefront. They've been masked for 2 years. Like they've been ignored.
Yep.
Yes, there's children that have never seen a smile. Like I see videos on TikTok, and they're called pandemic babies that have never been out in the stores, and they look lost. What kind of humanity are we going to have if kids don't know emotion? They don't know each other's faces. They're scared of everything. Like what we're going to discuss in a few minutes at the Board of Supervisors, what Supervisor Tom Patty said today about the 13-year-old. I mean, what kind of psychological warfare are you not getting? It's children have already been at the forefront of this, and now we need to correct the issue. And that means homeschool. That means help each other homeschool, help each other, pull away from the system, but also engage so you can course correct the system, because there's going to be more children. And if we don't do something now, then we're lost.
No, and if we're not fighting for our children and their future, what are we going to stand for, really? The way I like to say it is, our kids are sacred ground. You don't get to cross that line. And that's why mama bears and papas have been, at the forefront of this freedom movement for medical and health freedom for so long. And then, today, well, in 2019, when we founded Freedom Angels, one of the things that we painted some banners. One was "Welcome to Calabama, y'all," and "We the People versus the Vaccine Extremists." And that is that any person taking the position that it's okay to discriminate or segregate, that it's okay to put vulnerable populations and data into a database, a digital database, anyone taking any of those positions, they're the extremists. And if they're going to keep kids out of school or segregate or allow the hate language and the demonization, then they are the modern day George Wallace. George Wallace, if you don't know, was the governor of Alabama. He was fighting the Brown versus Board of Education desegregation of schools in the 50s, 60s. So in 1963, he had a famous standoff called the standoff in the schoolhouse door. And he stood in front of the schoolroom door to block two students from entering to desegregate. Ultimately, he lost that battle and stepped away, and he is literally known as being on the wrong side of history. And any superintendent or teacher or administrator or adult that does the same thing, that steps in front of that door and tells a little child that they're not good enough, that they're unclean, that they're different, that they can't come in here, then they're George Wallace. They're on the wrong side of history. And as our dear friend Kevin Jenkins says, they're modern day slave catchers.
Absolutely. That's the only way to describe it. This also I don't think parents actually grasp the situation of this. I hear a lot of parents say, I'm okay with the mask. I'm okay with it. But the mandate, right? The jab mandate, I'm not okay with. If they're acting like this with the mask, how do you think they're going to act when just more things get started to add on the schedule? And in the state of California, it's, you know, the bills here are saying you will have no exemptions, no exceptions. And public health is basically now a branch of government, and they're going to be able to add additional jobs onto the schedule without the proper legislative process. Like, if you're okay with this, it's just a muzzle, it's not a big deal, but I'm not okay with the mandate, your school is not going to stand for you. When these bills start being heard, when we have to engage with the representatives who actually write the bills. Could you imagine if like all the schools stood together and said, we're not okay with that? You know, we're not going to do this, and really put the pressure on these representatives. And so it's not just a bunch of crazy mothers, you know, out there banging on the wall. It's going to take everybody. And so if you have a teacher who's, I'm just doing my job, sorry, that's not good enough anymore. We can't accept that, because we're at the end of the rope right now. Having these crazy bills, you guys need to stand and do something. It's frustrating.
Yeah, and actually one of the best places to do it is to protect your children at schools. If your child, even if your child is still not in the system, like many and most of us fighting, it's still on us to protect and fight and hold the line on this, and to call it what it is and to stand against it. That's where, well, and like Denise said, there's legislation right now in California to not only mandate at the work level for private businesses the COVID shot, but also for the legislature to put it on the required schedule for childhood vaccines for school, and to not allow there to be a personal belief exemption attached to it. Right now, if your child is in school in California, you can battle them over.
You went on mute. There you are.
From a battle we fought in 2015. And just heads up for everyone to know, in 2015, SB 277 was the battle that removed the personal belief exemption against childhood vaccines for private and public daycare, preschool, K through 12, for the 10 shots on the schedule, which was still the 10 shots on the schedule. Really important for everyone to know that bill was comply or move state. There was no carve out for homeschooling. There was no carve out for kids on IEPs or 504s. There was no medical exemption that was functional. We fought the battle. We got a small exclusion for homeschool. We got kids on IEPs and 504s. You're excluded right now. Still.
Let me just make sure. In the state of California, if you have a child on a 504 or IEP, then your child is exempt from needing to have the jab or from needing an exemption. So you can battle this with your school. It is a law. They want to abide by laws, right? They have to abide by laws. So you go down, you can go to Legiscan, and they can still find it, right, on Legiscan, even though it's an old bill?
Yeah, SB 277. Legiscan.
Sorry, guys, I'm streaming on two different things. So just, I know, I'm like looking like this, and print it out and take it to your school. If they want to start abiding by, they want to talk legal, let's talk legal. All right.
Exactly. And that's important, because that's not on the chopping block right now. That's not in legislation. So remember that anyone with an IEP or 504, you go to SB 277 legislation from 2015. Denise told you how to find it. And you can see in there the statute that you can go and fight for your child for all 10 of the current vaccines on the schedule, and anything else they might add, like they're trying to add COVID-19 right now. If they do that, right now, there is a personal belief exemption to the COVID shot, because right now if a school district is trying to tell you that you have to take it, they are outside of the chain of authority on this. That means the only way if it's going through the California Department of Public Health, then that has a personal belief exemption, and hold them to that. Like if they start pushing you ahead of any legislative changes. As far as this battle, no matter, we're just going to tell you this because this is how we formed Freedom Angels. It doesn't matter what law they even pass. Do not comply. This is why you might as well start standing off at the schoolhouse doors right now. Might as well start kids on strike and peaceful picket lines right now, because it doesn't matter whether it's an executive order or there's an exemption or not, or a law. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and we have to stand against it. It's as simple as that. In fact, it doesn't even have to get any fancier than that. It's as simple as that. Don't comply. Get outside the doors peacefully and push at the hyper local level, especially the school districts. There's only 3 ways that you're going to affect the COVID shot situation in California. One is legislators, state legislators, and go to their district offices and press every relationship you have. 2 is any potential litigation. Don't put your money into that basket anytime soon. And 3 is through the school districts. Like Denise was saying, they can push back. They can say, we won't comply, and you have to stand with them. We have to all give each other cover on this. We're not going to accept those terms, even if it becomes a law.
Now and yes, don't comply is the only way, but let's just transition that to what happened now to BOS, right? So today we're going to talk the second piece, because that just was a transition from that. We had a Board of Supervisors meeting today in San Joaquin County, and they were discussing whether or not to end the public health emergency and how to allocate the relief funds. And one of those allocations was going to be to the airport. And, you know, it's pretty unbelievable what was said on record. I don't think people would really be able to identify it because of the language that they used and how they said it, and they made it extra complicated. But, and I also, when we're listening to them and they're talking about, okay, now let's discuss ending this public health emergency. And then the Office of Emergency Services comes up to testify. Like, how did that happen? That doesn't normally happen at these meetings. And we've seen and or been at a lot of the meetings at MCC. And go ahead.
Yeah, that was interesting. So the county OES, Office of Emergency Services, which, you know, is a part of the state OES, was really interesting that they showed up with a team and a whole, you know,
a cute little presentation. There you go.
Yeah. And they basically were saying, hey, there's no benefits to ending the public health emergency. There's only no benefits to ending it. In fact, if we end it, then we lose all of our FEMA money. So we should stay in a state of emergency, keep this FEMA money so we can run whatever unnecessary programs there are. Again, money diverted not into meaningful solutions, like how about point of care vitamin D testing? How about vitamin D supplement testing? How about making sure people are fed? And how about making sure little kids aren't being discriminated against? No, money's going to their public health pet projects that they want to keep, and they keep throwing around the vulnerable populations. We got to take these SNAP vans to the homeless so we can, you know, test them, track them, and vax them, you know, leave them hungry on the streets, you know.
For reference, I just want to go back to that. The office is in Stockton, California. The Board of Supervisors meeting is in Stockton, California, where we have one of the highest rates of a homeless problem. There's no big shelter. The shelter only covers double digits, and there's one family shelter with 10 rooms. If you were really that concerned about public health, you would clean your house up, right? Clean up your backyard, because this is a whole public health issue. And so they're sitting there and they're telling us, what if their words, their verbiage, what if there's another outbreak?
Right.
What if there's a fire? What if there's a flood? What if all these things? What if? That's why they wanted to keep us under a public health emergency, so they can continue to get COVID relief funds and allocate it however they want to allocate it without any checks and balances, because we're in a public health emergency. So there's a lot of things that have changed as far as how the legislative process pans out. So they're lying just so they can continue to spend money how they want.
Oh, totally. Keep it public. You know, again, we said this is a misuse of public funds. it's also fraud. I'm sorry, we're not in a public health emergency. You don't get to keep your emergency powers. They acknowledged, one of the chair acknowledged that he likes the emergency powers because they get to move so nimbly and flexibly and do things, that they don't normally get to do. Exactly why there's checks and balances around emergency powers. And we don't get to stay in a perpetual state of emergency that is not real. It's literally fraud. It's literally fake. So that you can have FEMA money to do your pet projects and then move without constraints and checks and balances in the normal process. Doesn't get to work that way.
They don't even believe their own lie, though. You know what I mean? Like, these board of supervisors, they're out partying. I see them every single time I go out. They're at bars, they're at parties, they're at events, crab feeds, unmuzzled. They're not jabbed either. We know that. Living it up. Like 2 hours. Living it up. And then they come and there's nothing we can do for the public health emergency. Like, so you're lying just so you can have these nice things. You're saying that. I mean, I told him, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be unemployed, but I have a job. What if I lose my job next month? Like, I'm just going to file for unemployment insurance. And just in case, you never know, I would be arrested for fraud. They need to be arrested for fraud. This has been the biggest power grab play. But you know what? I am very thankful to the ones who are holding the line at the Board of Supervisors. Tom Patty, Robert Rickman, they have really asked the questions that should be asked. We shouldn't be hiding away from knowing the information. Like, science doesn't always agree. So why is everybody agreeing on this? You know what I mean? Like, have a discussion and dialogue about what's actually happening instead of it's all great, there's no issues. There's only ones who have actually been holding the line on that. Miguel, his cousin Carlos Villapadua, he's an assembly member in California from here in San Joaquin County, and he just voted to extend the public health emergency. This man is at every single party doing his best live. He's dancing. He is not having a problem with anything. He's at all the bars. We're not in a public health emergency. So again, it's about the money, isn't it? How much did you sell our children for? I would like to know.
Yeah, and our freedoms and our due process and our checks and balances. Agreed. There's two of them, Tom Patty and Robert Rickman, holding the line there, which is great. They're saying, look, at some point you got to end this. You got to call it. We know we're not. Actually, the whole presentation right before is like showing, again, not in a state of public health emergency. You don't get to keep emergency powers, and you don't get to get the funds for that. We don't want the misuse of public funds. There are so many things that need help and money and strategy around and support in the communities. And we don't want it. There needs to be oversight on them. They need to be over target and not things that are just agenda driven, money driven, and fit some kind of protocol that they want to follow. That isn't advancing people's true foundational health and well-being. And I got to give huge props to Supervisor Tom Patty. He brought up that there was a young girl he met at an event this weekend, a 13-year-old, and she was wearing a mask. She doesn't even take it off to sleep. She is so terrified by the fact that we're in a pandemic, in a state of emergency, that she won't take it off ever, and she won't give a high five or shake a hand to anyone. That is so horrific. One of the things, couple of the supervisors in support of keeping the public health emergency going so they could keep the FEMA funding for the county office, OES, Office of Emergency Services, we're saying, well, there's zero benefit to ending this and there's no impacts. And that story about the 13-year-old girl shows one very clear impact. It may not be a direct, like if you do this, does one thing stop? No, but anytime we allow any one of these false policies or a belief, anytime we say there's an emergency and we keep that propped up just for that FEMA money, we are allowing people to perpetuate not only fear, but they allow like that superintendent of schools to hold the line and segregate and discriminate. Those things are directly correlated, even if they're not it's definitely has an impact, and they don't get to say otherwise. And
No.
it's like, I'm sorry, it's got to be illegal. There's no way. That is such a misuse of public funds.
Oh yeah, and we're going to dig into that. We're not going to let these things slide like that. What I experienced today was such a high intensity day for me today, right? It was just like there was a lot going on. We went from situation to situation. And it reminded me of, in 2019, when we were fighting SB 276, I remember I was still new to all of this, right? Like to that level, because that was like a whole different level of what the activism I was actually in. I was shocked at the behavior of politicians, how they would gaslight parents. They would gaslight us. Like, I didn't experience that before. And I'm like, what is going on? And I remember there was a couple situations I remember, but a child was called retarded and spit on because he was not jabbed. And this was done by a staffer. And then I remember them giving us a ticket to wait outside because people inside thought we were dirty. And I'm like, I will never allow them to make me feel like that again. You're not going to gaslight me. You are not going to act as though I'm crazy and I'm imagining all of this stuff. You don't get to do that anymore. And that was part of Freedom Angels, right? We, you and I connected and you said something and that was it. That was like, you know what? No, I am not this weak person because I'm a mother. I'm a woman. Right. And you're not going to move me. You got me totally messed up. You think you're going to move me. And so today, when Miguel Villapadua huffed at me, and I said, don't huff at me. Like, this is a job. You have been hired. I'm a taxpayer. Don't huff and puff at me. And he's like, I just did. I was like, oh, I see you, Miguel. Just wait until you have like something going on to where we can rally a call to action. And this is the thing with all, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or independent. I don't care. Just do the right thing. I'll rally behind Miguel. Still, I will rally behind you if you decide, you know what, maybe this, we can't be doing this. Maybe the legalities of it, not so much even the morals of it, but we can't do this. I'll take it. I will rally behind that. But we got to call them out when they're acting bot. We can't allow this to happen. This is why we're in the space that we're in, because we just let them get away with everything with no checks and balances. We vote them in and walk away. That's not happening anymore.
100%. And absolutely it gets support if they do the right thing. And that's just the way it is. But if they don't, I mean, there's, they have the chance to be a hero in their community. Nobody wants this. You talk about that discrimination. And I remember it in 2015, starting in that, is seeing the demonization and the gaslighting and all of it for us and our children, particularly. And, what I want to say, there's a lot of talk and culture about how, we're not a victim. I'm not a victim. Well, you know what? If our children are being demonized, segregated, discriminated against, then they are victims and nobody gets to say otherwise. And there can be no crime if there is no victim. This is crimes against humanity. There are victims. The beautiful thing is they're rising up and saying, I'm a free human and you're not going to enslave me. And these children who are supported and loved by their family and community are being told, no, you matter. And any violation of your human and civil rights is wrong. Then they can triumph through victimhood. They can see where it comes from. It's an evil agenda and that it's not sourced in their true being and their nature. But that doesn't mean there's no crime. There's victims of discrimination, segregation, hate, and demonization, and nobody gets to say otherwise, especially not the perpetrators or those allowing it.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like, just do the right thing. That's it. I will be out of your hair. You do the right thing.
Yep.
That's it. That's how to get rid of me. Anyways, that was like, today's just been like that kind of day, all the emotions of frustration and like the audacity of you. We got to do this more often. I think we have to, really have these conversations because there's so much going around in California right now. It's so hot here. We got so many bills and bills introduced by Dems and Republicans. Like this, we're like in a bad state here. So we'll do another live to discuss what's going on in California. Please subscribe to the channel. You can find our information at freedom-angels.org. Tons of resources. Tara did a beautiful piece on that website. I love it. And we are also on Telegram under The Informed Mama 209, and Tara is Pioneer Mama. And so we really are trying to get back up because we have been so deplatformed. We will keep up with what our new platforms are going to be. So thank you, my dear.
Thank you too, my dear. So happy to be, standing by your side. This is it. Tribe up, everybody. No one's alone, and we're all with you. And we know that, as we're standing against tyranny, you're with us. And when you are, we're with you, wherever you are.
You're like such a writer. She drove for hours just to get here to be like, nope, you don't get to do that.
So, and I shamed the BOS today. I was like, look, I got up at 4:30 in the morning, started driving at 5 a.m. for 3 hours to stand with a small group of little children who were being discriminated against, who were being demonized. And I said, you know what? Each one of you supervisors should be taking your turn at the door with those children. I shouldn't, they should be standing there with them.
Pick a side. There's no more time. We're out of time. You got to pick a side. All right. Well, thank you for joining, and we will